everyone, welcome to the OfferZen webinar on building high-performing engineering teams, a framework for first-time managers. I'm super excited tonight to bring you a conversation between our very own Laura Manzur and Raul Herbster from Spotify. Stepping in management can be pretty daunting for developers when they do that for the first time, and for many engineers, this will be a part of your career progression. So learning for those who have gone through this transition and experience and got the t-shirt, so to speak, is what tonight is all about. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Brendan. I head up the global expansion of OfferZen, based right here in Amsterdam. Before we dive in, however, there are some housekeeping things. So tonight's session is going to be interactive, which means you can ask a lot of questions. And there are several ways to do that. So there are 3 tabs on the right of your screen. I hope this is the right, maybe that is the right, but they're somewhere on the side. Chat, Q&A, and polls. You can use the chat function for general comments and random thoughts during the event, but also to kick things off, introduce yourself in the chat and let us know, for example, where you're joining from or what you're eating tonight. The middle tab is the Q&A area. Use this tab to post your questions during the session. And you can also upvote other one's questions if you're, for example, too shy to post one yourself, or if you just like that question better. We'll also be running a few polls in today's session, and you can weigh in by voting in the poll tab, also on the right. You never know. And for some lucky attendees, there will be swag simply for joining tonight, so stay tuned till the end of the session, and then we'll announce the winners. Finally, for those of you joining for the first time, OfferZen is an online talent marketplace helping software developers find their dream job here in Amsterdam and also in South Africa, and connecting companies to candidates who are ready to interview right now. So, as part of our DNA is that we believe in the power of community to drive connections, and hosting conversations like this is what we do to help grow the local tech ecosystem. So thanks again for joining us tonight. On that note, I'll hand over to the host of tonight's conversation, Laura Manzur. Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Brendan. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on building high-performing engineering teams. My name is Laura Manzur, and I'm a product manager at OfferZen, based in our office in sunny Cape Town. I'm very excited for tonight's conversation with Raul Herbster about making the transition from engineer to first-time manager. Being a first-time manager can be a challenge that is equally exciting and scary. This is especially true nowadays, as developers care more about company culture and professional growth opportunities than the tech stack or the financials behind it. In fact, we saw in our SA State of the Dev Nation survey that over 57% of respondents said they would turn down a job that had no growth opportunities or wasn't a culture fit. This is why I'm so excited about today's conversation, to help new managers navigate these challenges with confidence and give them tools to build the best engineering teams. So let's jump in. As mentioned, our speaker tonight is Raul Herbster. Raul is an engineering manager in mobile platforms at Spotify. He's currently working in the client platform tribe, supporting Spotify mobile developers with a seamless, powerful development environment to increase productivity and innovation. Raul, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Let's start off with some background. You have an interesting career which took you from Nokia's mobile division to academia and now being at Spotify. How did you end up as an engineering manager at Spotify today?
Oh, hey, thank you, Laura, for having me. It's a big pleasure. Yeah, I started as an engineer at Spotify, and then I became a senior engineer. And then eventually now as like an engineer manager. I was always very involved in helping the team to organize processes and then solving impediments to focus on delivery and helping my colleagues as well to grow. Besides doing my work as an engineer, I was also doing all of those, right? I was having an eye for that. And I was blessed to have also some good managers like helping me to develop some skills that I would need later on as an EM. So also these managers that I had before, they saw that I had like good skills for becoming an EM. We had some conversations. They also helped me on developing some of these skills, as I said. And when there was the opportunity inside Spotify, I just followed the process. I applied for that, and then I became an engineering manager.
That sounds great. So you're managing one team on the same continent and even the same office, and that's obviously enough of a challenge for a first-time manager. But yet you took two different teams into different continents, obviously countries, in your first management role. That's very impressive, you know.
Okay.
But the other thing is that as a remote manager for at least one of your teams, we want to know a little bit more about what were some of the practices you focused on setting up early on.
Yeah, sure. Usually when I work with my teams, and also like the remote ones, especially the remote ones, I really focus on building the trust as the very, very first step that I try to do. Because if you imagine, as we are remote, very far away from each other, to take some decisions, to drive the team and all of that, you need extra, I would say that you would need extra trust from that, if that makes sense. But like you really have to work on that specific part. So as a like practical tips that I usually do, and also like very first things I try to do, I have meetings with them, like to share my background with my new colleagues in the team, and then we build trust from that, right? So it's like really working on establishing relationships. So this is more or less me with the team. Another practices that I focus on setting up early on, it's we have to work a little bit with async communications, right? So we have like different time for working and different time to get in and out in the office. So I try to work on, for example, when, again, like some very specific things, like some very practical things. When you set up meetings, we really try to share the agenda early on so that everyone can contribute and then share the ideas as early as possible. And then we can have a good communication on that. And also, as said, async communication. How do we do async communication? At Spotify, we use a lot of RFCs. It's like a request for comments. It's when we write down changes on systems that we want to do, like or even propose new systems, and then we share that with like the teams or other teams, so that we can collect feedback around that. That works really, really well for remote teams and distributed teams. So that's like a practice that I try to set early on with everyone in the team.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. What do you think these specific practices are key to succeeding as a first-time manager?
Yeah, one is like come back into the first one, like trust, right? Like you as like a first-time as an engineer, you really have this people probably they will ask like, whoa, you don't have so many background on management. But actually, you do a lot of like background. You have a lot of background and competence on leadership, right? Like you as a senior engineer, like a staff engineer, I bet that you were like helping the team on changing things as well. So this really requires like skills. So you have to gain this trust of the team to make those changes happen. So that's why I think that this part it's a very important. The second one is communication. I have seen that when we don't have a very clear communication to teams, it's very easy for them to get lost, to lose their focus. And then when this happens, I think that we're going to talk about that later on. But when this happens, we have a bad impact on productivity. We have a bad impact on delivery. And then like I think that communication, clear communication, transparent and honest is very essential for success of the team, because we can really focus on the goal and just like put all of our energy on that.
That sounds very interesting. When obviously communication and trust, that is a process that takes time, right? So I'm interested in hearing how did that process happen? How was that evolution? because I'm pretty sure that trust and communication, getting communication right particularly, is not like an instant thing that happens overnight. So if you can tell us a little bit more about how was that process like?
Yeah, so with the trust, I think it's really, as you said, like it takes some time. And then you have to, actually the work with trust is my very first task from day one. So even before starting with the team, I have this like informal one-to-ones just to catch up with them, to know each of the engineers in the team, and then to understand how we can work together. I also usually say that I don't have teams, right? I work with the team. So like all of the engineers are my colleagues, and then we are working together for like one of several goals.
Mm.
So this is like, it takes time. Like building trust really takes time, but I think it's really worth it. So when I have these conversations, like later on, I realize that when you have also a very honest communication, when I share with engineers what's happening, how I'm working to unblock them, for example, you also gain the trust of them, because they see that you are transparent and then you are sharing information with the team. This is also a very good way, because they will see that I'm leading by example, so I see that also they do the same. So they will try to be very transparent. They will try to share information, to like work on communication really well. And I think that like when it comes from one side, the other side will complement, and then we have like a very good result at the end.
Yeah, that sounds great. Did you know your team beforehand? Have you already worked with some of them before?
No. Like I heard about them, that because I have been at Spotify for 4.5 years, and some of them, they were like I saw their names in some teams, but I had never worked directly with them.
And how was the process of meeting them that first time? And obviously, it was different with the ones on site and the ones that were remote. So what were the difference there, and how did that affect the long-term work that you do with them?
Yeah, it didn't, to be honest. Like I think that when we started this very open and honest communication, I didn't see big difference in those two approaches. Like if it's a remote or local team, I had good results with both. And I said, like in practical terms, what I did was having an informal talking with them, and then sharing the background, like what I did before arriving at Spotify, what they did before arriving at Spotify, so that I can know more or less a little bit more about their career journey, and also they know about mine, right? And then this helps me to, for example, let's say that an engineer has worked in like feature development, and now they became like an infrastructure engineer. So I see that this engineer had a different perspective when it comes to developing infrastructure. Maybe they have like a better background on product. And then this I would know beforehand, and then later on, I can use this knowledge about this engineer to connect this engineer with other people inside the company that can develop their product skills, right? So then this is like that's like how I have worked with local and remote teams, and then this has been very successful. And then another interesting thing is I have constantly one-to-ones with them. So I build trust every time. So either with remote or local teams, I have like weekly meetings with them. And then that's like where also we start the things.
Sure. Can you maybe share a bit on the guiding framework that you use as a first-time manager?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I said, like the trust, another thing, it's I like also to, I never, when I start with a team, I never really try to make changes. I at the very first hand, I just try to, I listen a lot. I try to see them doing the work a lot, what they do in terms of processes, how they do communication, because also they might have already some communication in place. So yeah, and then especially like also I really try to understand in which phase they are, because a team can be in like forming, storming, performing, and then I really try to understand where they are right now. From that, I can see more or less how I can step in, how I can help them. For example, I had like I had a team that was already performing, and then I was really thinking, okay, how can I help this team to go even, like how can I set up some things here in the team? So you have to take this. I think that's for first time engineer. You have engineer manager. You have to have your time to think about, like, like I know that's very exciting. I remember the first weeks of being an engineering manager, I was super excited, and of course, I really wanted to make things happen, to make changes. But like before making those changes happen, you need to understand where you are, right? Because this is like a team. It consists of several individuals, and then you have to respect them. You have to respect the interactions among them, and then that's like what makes a team. So yeah, I go on that. Like first I check, and then once I understand more about them, about the team, how the team works, then I start to bring on some changes. Like if I see that they need some help on the processes, like I go there with my like a basket of processes, and then try to help them with this. Always with an eye on like not creating processes for only creating processes. Like everything has to have like a reason, right? And then I'm a big fan of like agile and like processes. So we try first. I usually bring this always as an experiment. For me, processes should not be set to stone. We should try them and see if they work for a team. If not, we try to do some changes. And if still doesn't work we can completely remove it and then replace with something else. That's completely fine. And then as said, this will change from team to team. It's if one so far I haven't seen one process that would work 100% in two different teams. I usually have to make some adjustment between them to work the best.
Sure. So you mentioned that obviously at the beginning you want to learn where the team is at, right? And how they work together. And then you mentioned that you had one team that was like high performing team. How do you approach the existing processes depending on where the team is at? What do you prioritize first, or where do you focus first, depending on maybe if you can like tell us a little bit about specific examples, if you have any top of your mind?
Yeah. So for the team, I realized that they were doing very well themselves. Like as a team themselves, they were doing very well. So I wanted them to collaborate more, right? To go and cross some tribes, and then start working with different teams, and then help other teams to grow as well. So I realized that for themselves they were doing very good, but then like I started to work on how can we make collaborations work very well between us and other teams. So I started to work on defining like collaboration strategies, right? Like how we can, for example, set up some common frameworks for like a collaboration with different teams. And then different teams, I really mean like not only in the same tribe, but feature teams and infrastructure teams, right? And then how can we set up a collaboration of 6 months together? So I started to work on that and then also we realized that we had a lot of knowledge to do, and this high performance team was really eager to share information inside the company and outside. So also like I said, okay, so let's also work on some strategy for communications, like internal and external communication, to already to share something in our internal community and also outside. Because I think that's an interesting aspect as an engineering manager. You have to realize that things that you don't, as an engineer, maybe you don't see that they are connected, but they are very connected. For example, why did I think about communication with the external community, how to share things that have been doing, or like somehow, because I wanted to have like a easy time when hiring people. So then, like, I wanted to like create use cases, show to people outside Spotify how is it to work at Spotify in the team that I was working with, so that when I had conversations with candidates, I could easily just share like a post, right, like an external blog post, and then people could read and then get very interested on join the team. So this is very connected. So you might think that why you're sharing just like writing and going to conferences. It's not only to show your face, but it's also to show your team and the work that you do and attract people.
How did the team receive that, or how did they take it? Because obviously developers and engineers, they want to code, right? And oftentimes getting them into this bandwagon of like communicating and writing blog posts and doing presentations, it takes them out of that coding coding work. How did that happen, that transition? How did they take it? Were they excited about it, or
the teams, like since I started, like the teams in infrastructure, we have to give a very good support for internal users as well, like other developers. So we already create a lot of documentation, good documentation for our systems, for like our design, so that we can scale that the support for other developers. So we had already those things in place. And then the engineer, I think it's interesting to see, even like as an engineer, I saw this big difference between like the mindset of a feature developer and the mindset of like an infrastructure engineer. So the infrastructure engineer is very, like, we are very around providing support. I think that we are very customer oriented. So we really need to understand what's the need of that developer, how we can speed their development, how can we make them more productive, right? And then on that, like, documentation is a very important piece of the process. And then every time that we do something, like we create a new system, a new product for our developers, we always add, like, documentation is a very important element of that product, like as a requirement of the product. And then for that, they were like, let's say that we incorporated already documentation and writing up guides and so on as part of their work. So it was very seamless, to be honest.
That's very interesting. Okay, shifting a little bit the subject, maybe how was the process of aligning your new team when you started working with them, with the company tech strategy? Maybe can you give us an example of how that went?
Yeah. On that, like, I think that also that is like a blog post in our external, the Spotify Labs. It was about data, and it was specifically about these teams that I worked with. So they Spotify, it's like we have data as like a very important part of our work. And then we started this like 2017, and then the effort also spread around other areas like infrastructure too. So we had this as like a stack strategy of the company, and then we really embraced that as like infrastructure teams as well. So then when I started, I saw that we needed a lot of data. We need to collect data to understand how our internal developers, they were doing, like in terms of productivity, or how they were using our tools as well. So when we were working on like the backlog, or like what we should do in the future and then everything, we knew the data was important, and we were already working on the data, but we needed to do more. So we needed to really take that in our core, in our backlog, and really own data. So then that's like what we did. So we could align on that. Of course, there was like there is a time to convince people, like also like not convince, but like also for them to get interested on that specific thing. If it's very different, for example, let's say that the company comes up with, hey, we believe that framework X is a big thing now, and we should follow that. So engineers, they might say that no, we don't agree with that, and then there's not really a something really to make them interested on working on that and then achieve big results. So also we have to work on that, like explanations of like, okay, why this is important, right? Like why the framework X, it's like an important step for the company, and why we believe this is the correct thing. So in general, also sometimes you as an engineering manager, you have to understand the reasons behind the tech strategy being set up like that, right? You might have like an opinion as an engineer. Maybe this solution is not the best one in terms of like maybe you prefer another approach. But also you need to understand as an engineering manager, you also need to understand the business logic behind that. So this is even like, it makes it like easier for you to share with your engineers, and also that impacts the trust, because like you can bring this alignment from the top, like from the leadership to all the way to your teams.
True. So many first-time engineering managers speak about like mental shifts that are required when you step into a management role. So maybe you can tell us about some of those mental shifts that you personally experienced?
Yeah, sure. So there were like, on the top of my mind, I would say two. One was, I realized that I became responsible for the career development of like other people, right? It wasn't only me now. As an engineer, it was only me, more or less with myself. I was driving myself, but now I'm responsible for other individuals and then their career. Not only even when they're inside Spotify, like the time that they're at Spotify, but also like I tend to think that as an engineer, I'm also responsible for what's going to happen next, right? Like to give to the time that I have with this engineer, I'm going to help them to develop their skills as much as possible so that they can go to the next step. And then it's up to them to decide if they want to do the next step inside or outside the company. But like at that moment, I'm the one responsible for that. So this was the first one. The second one was like, I realized that I had to understand much more about myself to help others. So, so like my style of work, my style of management, I had to like also understand how is that. So one thing that really helped me was like the 5-factor model. You can also check it out. This is a tip for all of you. You can check like the 5-factor model. It was like you can do some tests online, and then that gives like a very good like direction of what you should look for.
That's very interesting. Maybe you can tell us about what are some of the things that you discovered at the beginning when you started like learning a little bit about you and about your team.
Yeah. The thing of like listening, it really reflected on the 5-factor model. Like it was like really you're like a more there and more like analytical. So it really resonated to that. So and then like also this work with strategies, right? That's also helped me to realize that like I knew already as an engineer, but like with the work on engineering management, I saw that I usually do a lot of like structural ways, like with strategies, like I have a plan and then I try to share that with engineers so that like we have like a goal. And that's like what affects me. I think that like if I would say the top of my mind, something that I always try to bring with my relationship with engineers, it's okay, let's discuss that. So let's collect ideas and then let's try to come up with a strategy. Let's come up with a plan, and so that we understand where we are going and what's our goal.
How long did it take you to get to that, to deriving or figuring out that you needed to put in place these strategies and work with them? Was that something that you knew at the beginning, or was that something that you kind of discovered and came up with sometime
Yeah.
later?
No, like not in the beginning. I said like by talking with the engineers, and also like listening to the team. We do retros like very often, and then it's like a safe place where they can share a lot of like what they feedback in general. So that's I was listening to all of that, and then I could complement those thoughts with like some one-to-ones that I was asking them questions like, hey, about that specific thing on the retro, what do you think? Can you share more about it? So then like I think that's a lot of like, as an engineer manager, I learned that it's good for you to have conversations, to not only be satisfied with like only one meeting, like let's say you have them retro, you heard them, but like if I have time, I for example, I'm blessed to have like one-to-ones with the engineers I work with every week. So then I also use those to collect their ideas and then see what they think about, you know, what we discuss in the retros, what's happening, or like some different topics. So yeah. So to answer your question, no, I didn't get that at the very beginning. I got those things to improve like later on. And
How did
then, sorry, yeah.
No, it's okay. How did that affect your relationship with the team? How did that relationship then change from at the beginning when you were still figuring these things out, and then when you put these like processes and strategies into play?
Yeah, I think that's like that is also always this like I do constant feedback with them. I try to really see if I'm going to the right direction or not. And then this helps me a lot to set up also the relationship. But as I said, like if we start the relationship based on trust and like and create a safer space, this the impact is like more or less like everyone have the same expectations about the impact, so it's not a big surprise, to be honest. So because like we are every step that I do, I share with them. So we are kind of like a very connected on the process, and then like if we see that's not the way that we should go, we can change quickly, and everyone's on board.
Okay. Before the next question, I just want to remind all the people that are here with us listening to please post any questions that they have in the Q&A tab, so we can get to them in a few minutes. So my next question for you is, a lot of managers these days are expected to kind of play a role of coach and mentor, and oftentimes developers and in general people are expecting that. So do you think that new managers should see themselves as coaches and mentors to the team members?
Yes, I do. I'm like one of those ones that are like a bit excited with like coaching and mentor. There are like three things that it's like three pillars that I believe that helps a lot everyone on their personal development. So one is like feedback. I really believe on the power of feedback. Second one is like coaching / mentoring, and the third one is sponsorship. So they are different things for different times of your career, or like depending on what you want to focus on, you know, like. But yeah, I do believe that like you as like an engineering manager to help people that work with you, yeah, you should step in sometimes as like a coach or mentor.
And what have you personally learned about coaching engineers?
It's for me, coaching is always like a two-way street. I learn a lot from them, and then they also learn a lot from me. So what I learned is that when I was talking about that with a colleague yesterday, there is no right or wrong most of the times. Like I think it's like you should. I learned that like you should do one specific like take one approach for a problem given circumstances. So, okay, like let's say that we are doing like a big system, and then the output of the design for that system, it depends of like how, if you want to scale the system, if you want to, how many engineers, like how many people are using that system or not. So so based on those answers, of course, the solution will be different, right? So that's more or less what I learned from coaching them.
Okay. Let's talk about something that you're very passionate about, which is diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Why is this so important to you personally?
Oh, that's a nice question. Yeah, I'm very excited for the topic. So I come from like from Latin America, and I'm Brazilian, and I'm also like a gay man. So I before before Sweden I could not bring all of my identities to my workplace. And then because of that, I had to like shut down parts of myself, and then that had a huge mental burden on me. And instead of focusing on my work, I had to use a lot of my mental health to, like think about what I should share with people, what I should not share with people, what I should comment about my life or whatever. So when the moment like that was fixed, that was done, I didn't have to worry about that anymore. I could use that mental health to actually focus on doing my work on the best way as possible. So I could just unlock my full potential, and that's like what happened. So by helping, but by having all myself at work, it could unlock my potential, and then I believe that I became a better engineer, a better human being with that.
How was the process from going from this feeling of not being able to like express yourself fully to actually being able to do so? Because obviously from Brazil to Sweden, there's also a big like cultural gap, right? Yeah. There's a big difference. So how was that experience for you?
It was like sometimes scary, at the same time like liberation, a lot of liberation as well. So because I could share this journey with not only with people from the LGBTQ plus community, but also with women, right? Women in tech. I could also just share the same similar experience with Black people, people of color, Indigenous people, so people from minoritized groups. So I like also one sentence that's like from the Aboriginal feminist group from Australia, saying that your liberation is tied to mine. So like there was like a very insightful and like a very rich process on that.
That's very interesting. Maybe do you have any like practical ways that managers can help create a more inclusive workplace and teams?
Yeah, I for managers, I usually like to talk again about three things. So it's like, of course, we focus on diversity, we focus on inclusion and belonging. So also, by the way, before I forget, I worked with someone someone that really changed my perspectives on this area, and it then gave me a lot of tips. Scassi Mackey, I can send later his LinkedIn profile, and then you can follow him, and he has very great articles, by the way. And then this I learned from him, so that I don't forget to quote him. So we have a diversity that's focused on people, right? And then we have inclusion that's focused on processes, and finally it's belonging that's focused on culture. So diversity, it's like you work together with your talent acquisition, like your recruiter. Or also, if you don't have a recruiter to work with you, you have this perspective of diversity in your mind. So then that's like, yeah, you have to make sure that your pipeline is like have minoritized groups as well, and then you have to go there and work for that. Then we have inclusion. It's about processes. So I usually say, hey, think about, when you set up agendas, when you set up strategies, try to see different perspectives. Try to listen to different voices. For example, I don't like to book meetings at the end of the day because usually parents, they're going to pick up their kids. So they usually have to leave a little bit earlier, right? So also for remote teams, I really like to have like an agenda 2 days in advance so that those ones that cannot join, they can send, okay, this is what I thought about this topic of the meeting and this is my contribution. And then, so also at the end, we send the notes so that everyone could not come to the meeting, will be there. And they're like more on the inclusion, but it's like just like easy thing that you can do right now and then stop at one mind. The last one is like belonging, and actually it's the least tangible aspect, and it's very hard to measure sometimes. So this requires a little bit of more work. But try as an engineer manager, try to think of the employee, the life cycle of an employee. So someone starts at the company, is hired, then they have the onboarding phase, then they start to work with the teams, right? Then you have the performance evaluation every year, things like that. So the key point is to make sure you as an engineering manager, but also like other areas of the company, belonging is made of like injection of micro experiences of belonging in each of those phases. It's very hard to reach belonging if you just like come with a big step and then, oh, let's change a word. No, it's like usually micro experiences in those different aspects. So when you're having onboarding, try to think about belonging there, right? Try to, like when you're doing development talks, also try to think about belonging and then inclusion there as well. So that's my overall suggestion. It's try to think about different phases, and most importantly, some engineering managers, they think that's also what I learned in this, like my first time as an engineer manager. You might have HR working on that, right? Recruiters working on that too. A lot of people, that's not you working on diversity, inclusion, and belonging, but you are also responsible for that. I think that engineering managers should not expect things to be, these things be solved by them. You really have to step in and help, like because it's the team that we're working with. You're directly responsible for that too.
100%. Do you have maybe an concrete example about one of those like micro experiences that create belonging at one of the phases?
Yeah, like I remember that because I was like at Spotify we have the ERGs. That's like employee resource groups, like groups of employees that are organized by some specific. For example, we have the Latinx, we have women at, we have the spectrum for LGBTQ plus, so different ones. In the Latin Heritage Month, we asked them to, because in our office in Stockholm, we have speakers like music in the common areas and the lifts. And then for that month, we asked to play only Latin artists in the elevators, right? And then the common areas. And then there was this person that came the very first week to Spotify. And then their favorite, like I think that he was from Colombia, I guess. And then he was playing his favorite singer in the lift. And then I was having lunch and I could hear the conversation. I was like, wow, this is so great because they were playing my favorite singer from Colombia in like an office in Stockholm, Sweden. And this really, it really brought me like a feeling of, okay, I think that we did it right.
Yeah, I can recall having similar experiences in even like restaurants and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I definitely see that being contributing to belonging.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we seem to run out of time and we want to go into the questions from the audience. But before we do that, do you maybe have any final thoughts or advice on any of the topics we've been covering to close?
No, just like in general, I would say as like if I could give a tip, something that really teach me on this is that different from engineering, that you can commit, like you can make a pull request and then you can commit and see your changes very quickly. An engineer, like the work as an engineer manager, sometimes not that, like you don't see the results quite fast as like a PR. So be patient, right? Be patient and then be like honest with the team and then transparent and be trust. And then you see the results later on. But you have to be patient too.
Okay, it seems we have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna ask the audience to please don't post any follow-up questions to any of Raul's answers. So our first question comes from Matthew Seegers, who wants to know how do you maintain a sense of urgency and importance in the team without adding any undue stress?
So usually that, if I get it correctly, it's I think it's talking about planning, right? So we that like at Spotify we also work with what we say KTLO, like keep the lights on, and then this is we have KTLO, we have other things going on in the company that have different like priorities. So besides all of our work, we also categorize big blocks. So we have KTLO, bug fixing, let's say, yeah, things like something from business. So we try to focus per block. I think that also helps the team to focus on something. And then if you have to reprioritize, you don't have to reprioritize blocks. Like a lot of things, we usually reprioritize things inside a block. Okay. And then this gives you more flexibility, and it then doesn't impact all the other pieces of your planning. So I think that's like I would say that as a suggestion, try to scope your work in big blocks, and then work on reprioritization of those blocks within things inside that block.
That's a very good tip. Okay, we have another question. What do you do to prepare for your one-on-ones, and how do you keep track of those one-on-one conversations with all of your team members?
I love that question. Yeah, we keep a journal together. So and it's shared between me and the engineer, but doesn't belong to me. I usually say I prepare, I write it down the notes, everything, but it belongs to the engineer. So if I'm not their manager anymore, they can share with someone else, right? So I ask them to, if they have something in mind, to write down the questions before the meeting so that I can, if it's something simple, it's fine, but if it's something that I need to talk with someone else to make connections, like, you know, I need some extra time. Yeah, like if there is some more deep conversation that we need to have, I usually, if I need to give like a constructive feedback, I said like the work that I did of knowing their background, you know, understanding how they work, it helps me a lot. I can like talk to this person about it, and yeah. But usually, also we establish like in our first meeting, we also establish expectations. As well, Cassie, he made this like, how is it to work with Cassie? Also, like I usually share like, how is it working with Raul as your manager? So I put like a list of expectations that I have of engineers, and also I describe a little bit of how I work as a manager, so so that we have this clear expectations from each other.
Great. Robin asks, what would be your reading suggestion for developers looking to make the move into a managerial role?
Look, to be honest, I don't have like one specific book, because that's the hard part. It's like that's the hard part, because it's a bit. I usually say that's like infrastructure. Infrastructure, it's not so easy to learn. So you don't have one specific like a course for that, workshop. You have to do things yourself, and then learn a lot from that. I would recommend you to take a look on Laura Hogan. I like her blog. Like you can check her blog, and then I think that also she has very nice books. You can take a look on, but you can start with her blog. Can I write in the chat then her name? Where
Yeah.
should I? Okay, so you can look for Laura Hog. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Someone just posted someone about her, like one blog post that she has about one-to-ones. That's great. I think that you can if I would recommend like start one, go for Laura Horgan as like the very first one. Yeah, I think that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Another question we have here: do you still spend time coding now as a manager?
Unfortunately not. It was funny because like the very first time that I started to talk about it and then I decided to make the transition, my managers, they were saying, but are you fine to stop coding? I think it was one of the first questions. Are you fine to stop coding? And then it's like, yeah, but maybe I will have time, right? And then let me like, maybe not.
I sympathize with that.
But like sometimes I take a look on on the PR. It's good to be able to read that, but no, I don't have time to. Yeah.
So unfortunate. Here we have a tough question from Stefan. How do you get a team member to communicate better in a meeting or group setting if that colleague is more comfortable with one-on-one meetings?
I would start actually asking why the person doesn't feel comfortable to share on the meeting. So my EM brain works like that. So I don't see like oh, this is not the behavior that I would expect. Instead, I think, okay, why this person is having this behavior, and then I would suggest you to look on that. Like, is it because the meeting is not like a safe space for sharing? That's why they come to you through like personal, like more safer one-to-ones. Yeah, I would suggest you work on that. And then if you think that like there is no reason to not share data things, I said like for the meetings, try also to write the agenda and then also give some tips on like being inclusive. Like you can find on the internet like a lot of like quick like sum ups of like how to be inclusive in meetings, and then I usually add the link of one of those at the end of the meeting, the agenda, so that and then sometimes also like if it is a thing that happens over and over in meetings, I usually take the very first minutes to say, hey, right, like to go through what it is to have an inclusive meeting. So yeah, I'd suggest those steps.
That's a very good tip. Another question, is there a trade-off between high performance and async communication, or is it possible to achieve the same level of performance as async?
No, like we are talking about async in terms of hours, right? Like for example, let's say
Yeah.
Central, let's say Stockholm or Amsterdam, like Netherlands and New York. So it's like things of hours and not days. But I think that's like the point is like you have to make sure that both teams, if you're working with these teams, they are collaborating across Atlantic. It's important for you to make sure that those two teams, they have a very clear understanding of the priorities, and that then they have a very clear set of expectations. So what usually happens with the async communication is that teams, one team might think that this is very important for them, the other team doesn't think that's important. So when you set expectations saying, hey, this is very important for us because of this, and then we expect you to do this work because of that. So like I think that I've learned that this is very important to set up expectations so that the teams are very aligned, and then even if you have async communication, that won't be a problem, because as soon as they read that, they will start working right away.
True. Okay, another one. How does having mentors help in transitioning to a management role?
Because there are some skills that maybe you don't know that you have to develop, or maybe you know that you have. You are like blessed for, like you're gifted for having one specific skill that's very important for management, for like leadership in general, right? So I think that's like we need someone extra, like someone external, especially if it's on the leadership, and as well, like just to clarify that leadership doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be an EM. You can be like a product manager. You also work as like leadership role, staff engineer as well. Like you're responsible for the growth of, like you're responsible for many things. So we need this external view to point out like what you should work on. Yeah, as said, like there's a lot of things that you have to understand about yourself to be also a good manager, but it's also important someone like if possible, like a leader on like leadership layer to come to you and say, well, I think that you might have problems in the future, and then if you don't develop this specific skill.
True. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Is there an optimum number of engineers in a team that you feel is possible to manage well and keep the team performing at a high level?
That's like a good question. And then my answer for that's always, it depends. Because it depends like which product you're doing, right? Like it depends what are the problems that you're tackling. It depends as well, like if your team it's only for a project or not, right? For one certain amount of time, if it's for 1 year or not. So if you have like a team that we always have like a backlog to work on, and then they will only evolve. And that's my perspective as an EM, right? Like I think that's more than 10. It's a bit hard because I like to, as I said, like I need to, it's not that I only like, I also need to, I have this need of talking, like personal need of talking to the engineers like weekly. And then if I have like, let's say half an hour for each of them, if you have 5, if you have 10, you have already 5 hours of your week only for one-to-ones. And then also we are going to talk about their development in one time of the year, and then that usually takes a long time, plus other meetings. So yeah, you have also to check how much of meetings you are able to take. That's also another thing of the EM. You're usually involved in some meetings, like a lot of meetings. And yeah, I would also tell you to consider how many hours you can stay in meetings.
True. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Raul, for joining us tonight, and thanks to our audience for all the great practical questions. We received a lot of questions tonight. If your question was not asked, we will ask Raul to answer them later, and we'll post them on our blog on OfferZen.com. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Brendan, over to you.
That was a great conversation. Thanks a lot, both of you, Raul. I think that was incredibly dense in information, so there's a lot for everyone to think about. I really like what you said about having the team, have the process fit the team and not the other way around. But what stood out most for me was your answer about inclusion and belonging. I think I've never heard such a practical and also personal example that is also pretty close to the mission of OfferZen, so that's why I double liked it. But that it chasing a sense of belonging really cuts into your mental capacity, and if you then relieved from that, you can use that to unlock your own potential, which I think is a strong argument also for business leaders that find this topic still to be a bit fuzzy, and unlock your people by tapping into that. So I thought it was a great example. Thanks a lot for diving into that. We have some gifts to give, swag gifts for 5 people. Name the winners: Ruben Vosmeer, Patricia Chimlowitz. Sorry, Patricia, if I pronounce your surname wrongly. Christy Williams, Ricardo Torres, and Thiago Cordiero. Hope I pronounced that right as well. We'll reach out to you to send you your swag. This will most likely be our last virtual event of the year, but we're working on a whole new event series. So if you want to stay up to date, you can join our meetup pages. We have a tech hiring and a tech community meetup page. Simply search for OfferZen on meetup.com and join us there. Thanks again for joining, everyone. I think it was a great session. Thanks a lot, Raul. Thanks a lot, Laura. Great night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.